Hi, I'm doing a reading for Marilyn Monroe, who we all know as the famous movie star. The first thing I see is she has an incredible chart for early success, success in some type of art. And this is shown very clearly by Neptune in the first house in Leo. Neptune rules film, photography, movies. It's in positive aspect, a trine to Venus, the planet of love. The planet of love is at the very top of the chart. Venus is in Aries, conjoined to Taurus midheaven. This area of the chart rules the profession or the career, as opposed to mere jobs, which are ruled by the sixth. Now, not only does she have this wonderful trine, which guarantees long-running success. No matter what happened to her, being fired from films, drugs, miscarriages, or whatever, unhappy love affairs, this is a career that would have gone on forever. And by studying the careers of famous movie stars that we like, we can see that a certain amount of fans never fade away. They never leave the person that they like. She was a very talented actress. I don't think she would not have gone on to other parts. Men do fall in love with women, and women fall in love with men even in their 40s and 50s and so on. I think she could have had a good career with men as well. Not that men are really a career like that, but you know what I mean. I just don't think she would have faded away. So she's really a great person for enduring, but she may not have realized that herself. Now, the other major aspect I see right away is an incredibly strong grand trine in water. This shows that her Saturn, planet of discipline and responsibility, is aligned with Pluto, strong physical drive, and also with Mars for energy, ambition, and aggression. She would always have worked so hard in the early years of her career. She was not the crazy, lazy person we see in negative PR stories. She did suffer, obviously, from some problem in the closing years of her career that caused her to be always late, which really was upsetting because it cost millions to the makers of the movies and upset her co-stars. But in the early and the middle part of her career, I just don't see that as being so strong. She was very disciplined. Her first employer said Marilyn was the hardest working model I ever saw. She would take home every photo, even the crummy negatives. She would study them. She would pore over them. She wanted to make every angle better. She detached herself from her looks. She wanted to see how she looked on the screen. Even in her obsession with bringing along people to movie sets, which so irritated the producers, bringing her coaches to the sets, she was also a sort of workaholic. So if we like Marilyn, we can see a different filter on things that she's done. Her early movies are very interesting. When I look at them, especially the ones involving long, complicated singing and dance routines, she had no bad image in those days for being late, and they're really great to see. You can catch some of them here at YouTube, her early films. I'll put them in the closing credits later on when I do that. So what are the problems then in her chart with so much going on that's great in her career? Profession, work, and public image, relationship with the public. Her moon, of course, for her mother is afflicted. The moon is square to Saturn, giving depression to Marilyn, and opposing Neptune, which also can rule madness. So the mother was in and out of asylums for all of Marilyn's childhood. And this, of course, would cause some problems to Marilyn and her mind as well. Not that I think Marilyn was ever that crazy. Many people have even worse childhoods. She did have some love and affection as a child, not only from her mother, but from other caretakers. I don't believe she was really sexually or physically abused. And her first husband, who should know, said Marilyn was normal sexually, and she was a virgin when she married him. So I would take her first husband's advice more than negative sensationalist stories that were written later on when she became a famous movie star. So the moon is afflicted, and the Saturn square is on the fourth house of home. And paradoxically, she also has 2 trines there as well, showing that she did have happiness as a child. She did have some confidence. Of course, the shakiness comes from the mother and the problem there. Now, the father went away around the time of her birth. And also, fortunately, the father aspect is not that bad, and that could be because he disappeared completely, which would also cause psychological stress on Marilyn, but the mother aspect is by far the worst. Now, the house of marriage, too, now. The house of marriage is very fortunate in some ways. It's got a mixed house. The moon is conjoined Jupiter. This is an aspect for success, wealth, and fame in her marriages. And her husband number 2 and husband number 3 were already famous. One was famous for sports, and the other, Arthur Miller, was famous as a playwright. So this has problems, of course, in that the marriage is ended, but they were love marriages. She was not an opportunist. She had her own career. She didn't really marry for status or ego. If you like Marilyn, you don't see that or think that. She married at her own level. She was an extremely talented, interesting person in her own right. I see her as actually a modern person, someone who was a little ahead of her time, especially in her attitudes towards nudity and the human body. Her first burst of notoriety was when she was discovered as having posed nude for a calendar. It was a very tasteful nude, unlike a lot of nudes that came later. And she made a joke of it, saying that when they asked her about what did she have on, she would say the radio was on. So I think that's really showing her sense of humor. And of course, people had to do things like that to get money, to pay their rent. And I think it worked out well for her. It did make her more famous, although it caused people that were less progressive not to see her acting talent. We have to try to think how people in other time periods thought, which is why we have the extreme overemphasis on her sexuality, sex power, sex mania, blah, 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 blah. I really don't see that in her chart so strongly, and I am trying to read from this chart. What I do see is love and enduring success. And I don't really think that her level of incredible fame so many years later is based on something that we like about her that is much more than sex appeal. There's something very vulnerable about her, something very tenacious and very determined. She did keep trying to make her life work. She's very much a fully human figure. She's not just a creation of the studios. She worked at self-creation, at creating herself. Her interest in reading, her interest in books, the way she left her career in Hollywood to go to study serious theater, even that's mocked by negative people. This is something very audacious of her. She could have stayed in Hollywood and just stuck to a certain type of role, but she wanted to make more of herself. Again, this incredible ambition and this incredible drive. I think I'd like to dwell on her spiritual side as well, which I didn't do in my earlier readings. She's a very kind person, very empathetic, sympathetic, idealist. This is a strong Neptune in the first, which also, of course, gives a bit of a problem with the prescription drugs later on, and a warning against drinking too much. The moon conjoined to Jupiter is very generous, very humanitarian. She had empathy for all types of people, not just one type of minority group. She had a generalized goodwill towards the world. She was a loving person with Venus in Aries, also trine to the Neptune. And she was very friendly with her husband's relatives. Even after she had broken off with her husband, she went on telephoning them, and she would take Arthur Miller's old father on trips and visit him. So she was a very thoughtful person to different types of people, to all types of people. This would help her a lot as an actress as well. She was a witty person. Okay, we'll move along to other facets. A witty person with the Sun conjoined Mercury in Gemini at the cusp of the 11th. She was of average or above average intelligence. And her Mars in Uranus, now this would be a difficult aspect and make her prone to accidents. Mars-Uranus conjunction is in the 8th house of death. I never really wanted to see this myself, but this would make her prone to accidental death. I have read all the books on Marilyn Monroe, so I have thought other things apart from that. So I am being detached myself as an astrologer when I am forced to admit that to you. Even though it looks like an accidental death, there could have been other people involved who are pressures or stresses upon her that day or during that time period. I don't think we'll ever know the truth of this matter. I don't think that's why we go on liking her movies. I hope not. I don't think so. So there is a Pluto trine to the Mars in the 8th. With a North Node, that's a little bit unclear. It shows, I don't know, possibly some enmity around her death. Even though it is a trine, again, it's not clear to read even in the chart, like the aspects of her death. So her other big problem in her later years was showing up late on sets. I don't know why they just didn't glue her to the movie set area. Possibly they should have changed the laws or the rules and just made her stay on set. Because if they'd done that, they would have made sure that she would have got to the movie set on time. I'm sure there are probably rules against that. This would involve the ruler of the 6th house, and that too, has a little bit of negativity. Saturn ruling the house of work and health does have some good aspects, but it also has a square to the moon. This would show that her psychological problems from her mother were the prime trigger of her later problems, as well as, to a lesser degree, problems in her marriages. Those would both be stresses, and I think in terms of her whole life story, the mother being in and out of asylums all her childhood would be her worst problem, more than her marriages, more than her problems with studio bosses, and more than her problems even in foster homes or the orphanage, which seems to have been a little bit more cheerful even than her relationship with her mother, which does sound crazy, but... So all in all, it's tragic that this person did die when she did die, and I think she had a lot of love and support, but it was just not meant to be that she connected with the right amount of helpfulness that she needed in that last year of her life. I hope that she is an angel in heaven, and I think she is. She came here to become the most famous and luminous person among our female Hollywood stars. And anyway, all I can say is please watch her earlier films and you will see even more great movies about Marilyn. Thanks for following.